Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TEDxScarsdale 2020. My name is Rowan Hafner, and I'm the president of Scarsdale High School's TEDx Club.
My name is Rashika Bunsell, and I am a vice president of the SHS TEDx Club.
I'm Ethan Hirsch, and I'm also vice president of the SHS TEDx Club.
Today, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for this historic virtual event. This entire event, including what you're listening to right now, was completely pre-recorded and edited last week. And while we cannot hear one another in person, feel free to use the chat function to make this a more lively and interactive event.
Our first speaker is Genevieve Piturro, founder of the Pajama Project. Next, you will hear from Rob Kissner, founder of the Digital Arts Experience.
Our third speaker for the day is Elza Erkip, an electrical and computer engineering professor at the Tandon School of Engineering. Unfortunately, Ms. Erkip had some scheduling conflicts, and the speech you'll be watching was filmed in 2019 at the Tandon Tomorrow Speaker Series. Our final speaker for today will be Paul Feiner, the Greenburgh Town Supervisor.
Before we hear from our first speaker, we'd like to show you Ted's own introductory video.
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Our first speaker is Genevieve Piturro. Ms. Piturro was a television marketing executive until she dramatically changed the direction of her life. In 2001, she jumped off the corporate ladder and founded the hugely successful national nonprofit Pajama Program, when a 6-year-old girl's question changed her life forever. Almost 20 years later, Genevieve's Pajama Program has delivered over 7 million magical gifts of new pajamas and new books to children throughout the U.S. Genevieve is now a professional speaker and consultant on the human connection, sharing life and leadership lessons she learned through her Pajama Program journey. Her first book, Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas: How to Transform Your Life, Embrace the Human Connection, and Lead with Meaning, was released earlier this month on August 4th. She has been interviewed for many local and national media outlets, including Oprah, Today, Good Morning America, The Early Show, CNN, Fox and Friends, O Magazine, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Parenting Magazine. Genevieve rang the NASDAQ stock market opening bell in 2016, and she has been the recipient of many local and national awards as she inspires others to listen to their heart and voice in pursuing their passions.
My name is Genevieve Piturro, but I always wanted to be Mary Tyler Moore. I watched Mary every week. She was my idol. She moved to a big city. She got a job in TV, a single, independent woman. She had a great apartment, a fabulous best friend. They had so many adventures, and she had the most amazing wardrobe. I wanted it all. I wanted that success. I wanted that status, and I wanted that power. And what I came to learn over the next 20 years was that there was a very different idea of power that was more impressive and more meaningful. So I was climbing that corporate ladder, getting all the things that Mary had, and after 15 years of climbing very fast, I heard a voice. The voice came from here. Didn't come from here like it usually does. And the voice asked me clearly in a whisper, if this is the next 30 years of your life, is this enough? Wow. It rocked me. I sat down and I thought almost immediately, no, I missed something. In my very traditional upbringing, Italian family, father off the boat, mom's family from Sicily, I was the firstborn, first child, first daughter. That's me, the chubby girl on the right. And it really was expected that I would, yes, go to college, but then get married and have children. And that wasn't my path. It was very traditional, get a job, climb the corporate ladder, be successful. My father's work ethic and my mother's love. So that voice, that day, asking me if this is enough, really made me focus on what I had been doing and where I was going. And the answer that came so fast to me was, no, you did miss something. And I realized I missed having my own family and I missed having children. So I thought, what in the world could I do at that point to bring children into my life? And I watched the news every night and I read the newspaper every morning. And I saw pictures and heard stories of the atrocities that belonged to the children in my town, in my city, who were neglected and abandoned and brought into shelters. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I could go and reach those kids at night, maybe I could bring a little peace, a little normalcy to their lives. I don't know why that voice came to me. I thought I was on my way to what I thought would be a fulfilling life, but it came to me. I called the shelters. They were happy to have me come in, and I was thrilled to go in. I had a bag of children's books. I was in my corporate suit, and I showed up. They showed me into a room, which was bare, and the carpets were worn. There wasn't any place for a grown-up to sit. So I sat on the floor. I saw little faces at the door. And one by one, the children were peering in. And one by one, my heart was melting a little more. And it was a rush of emotions. I think I'd been climbing so fast that I didn't have time to feel what I was feeling then was just, I was overcome. One by one, they came in, they sat on the floor, and I read the stories. Week after week. That moment I arrived, and those minutes I spent with those children were the quietest I'd ever been in my life. Week after week, the same routine, a different shelter. One night, I went to see where they were going to another room to go to sleep at night, and what I saw broke my heart. They had nothing to change into. There were just futons and cots, and the room was as bare as the room I'd been reading in, and they were all the same in every shelter. Lovely staff, but this wasn't bedtime. My mom made bedtime incredible. We had cookies and milk and story after story, and she'd make up stories. And of course we had pajamas. There weren't any. So as I was leaving, I asked if I could bring pajamas, and they said, that'd be great. I brought pajamas next week. Sat on the floor, read the stories, and one by one, I gave out the pajamas to the kids. I thought they were going to be so excited, but as always, they were very quiet. One little girl wouldn't take the pajamas. She just shook her head. I didn't know what was wrong. The other children took the pajamas, no problem, went into the room to go to sleep, but not her. She was afraid. I didn't know what. So I tried one more time. She shook her head no. She wanted to watch me. So they let her watch me off to the side. I handed the rest of the pajamas out and I walked over to her. I still had the pink pajamas I had picked for her over my shoulder. I went over to her and I knelt down. And I said, honey, these are for you. I know they'll fit you. They're pink and you have pink in your shirt, and her shirt was soiled, and her pants were too short, and her shoes or sneakers were so big, and her ponytails were lopsided. So all I could do was offer her these clean, warm, and cozy new pajamas. I made one more attempt, and she looked at me, and she said, "What are they? What are pajamas?" She could barely say the word pajamas. I found myself explaining to this little girl that pajamas are what you change into. That you didn't have to wear your clothes at night. That was it for me. My emotions were running amok. They took her over to the side, to the bedroom, and they changed her into the pajamas, and she gave me a little smile. And that was the beginning of the end, as they say. And that power that I thought was the all-important answer to everything that I was looking for wasn't. And a new idea of power was starting to form. I started to tell people about her, this little girl. I told everybody. And it seemed that everybody had been standing with me in front of her. She and I had this connection, this human connection. And then everybody I told this story to had the same connection, not just with me, but with her. Somehow the human connection, that whole idea is so powerful that it stops everybody in the moment, in the rushing of our lives, to see and feel that little girl. Talk about power. So everybody I told connected with me and with her, and with the same idea that this isn't right. Day after day, word spread. I got a call from a man who started asking me questions. Started asking me, why was I doing this? What was I doing? Where was I getting the pajamas? What did I think was going to happen? I thought I was going to get arrested. I didn't know what he was asking me all these questions for. And he said, do you think this is really helping? I said, that's all I can do. And he said, it is helping. I was a little boy in an orphanage, and the bedtime was my most frightening, lonely time. And I can tell you, I felt love from afar when I knew someone was thinking about me. And I know these children feel this love and your compassion from afar. So the human connection was starting in a small way. First with her to me, then with me and everybody else to her invisibly. And more people were being connected. First it was Dave, then there was Hurricane Katrina. I got a call from a man named Randy. Randy said, you're giving out pajamas to children. What about the children of the families devastated by Hurricane Katrina down south? I have trucks if you have pajamas. Wow. It was just a couple of us doing this now. 11,000 pairs of pajamas showed up at his loading dock and put on those trucks. And we got down to the Houston Astrodome. Talk about a connection between all those people through one man who had the idea maybe the human connection would work. Got to the door of the Houston Astrodome. I had made contact with a nurse that was there. I needed to connect with somebody on that side. And she said, we need them desperately. These people have nothing, and these children, some of them are very sick, and I'm doing the best I can, but we have a full dome here. Bring those pajamas and call me when you get outside the doors. It was midnight. We got outside the doors. I called her, tried to get in. Before she can get to the doors, the security guard was telling us, no way. He wasn't opening that door to let the truck on the floor. I heard Lynn, and she knew I was on the other side of the door, and she knew what we had. And I heard her yelling at the security guard, threatening him with neglect if these children didn't get those pajamas, those clean clothes, because they had been in soiled and wet clothes for days. Those doors opened and our truck rolled onto the floor. and those children got their pajamas. Lynn, a stranger, a nurse, connected to this little idea. This human connection was growing. A national magazine heard about pajamas for children. They wrote an article this big. Thousands, tens of thousands of boxes and letters and pajamas and books and cash showed up at my doorstep. I met a great man just during that time. And I told him what I was thinking about doing. And he said, go for it. Connection number 1,000. That magazine touched so many people that all those boxes kept arriving. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe that about this invisible connection. Then a national show, TV show called. Said, come on, tell the story. Tell us about the kids. Tell us about what we can do. I went on to the show. What an incredible surprise to know that everyone in the studio audience was told to bring a pair of pajamas and then get as many as they could in ways that were going to be a surprise. 32,000 pairs of pajamas revealed, were collected. All those people, that human connection. And all along, I was still in awe and surprised and unaware of its power. But there was one more idea that still was going to come to the surface soon. 20 years and 7 million pairs of pajamas and books now distributed to children across the US and Puerto Rico. 63 national chapters in cities and states across the US. That power of the human connection led to a final idea, which is a truth that I became aware of suddenly, because all through the 20 years, people were saying, look at the power of one. Look at the power of one. People do things and it's just an idea. And look, it's the power of one person. That's all we need, one person. And I say no. That human connection is not the power of one. It's the power of one another. And that power of one another moves mountains and moves people.
Wow, that was Genevieve Piturro. If you'd like to find out more about her, feel free to check out our website in the description of this video.
Next, you'll be hearing from Rob Kissner. Rob is the founder and president of the Digital Arts Experience, whose mission is to provide kids and teens in the community with access and exposure to the world of creative technology in a fun and safe environment. Created in 2012, the Digital Arts Experience provides programming to hundreds of local kids and teens in their Scarsdale location and in schools and libraries all over Westchester and Southern Connecticut. Rob is also a professor of entrepreneurship and design thinking at Iona College's Hines Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Mr. Kissner is even a Scarsdale High School alumni.
What happens when you face a difficult situation? It could be in your professional life or your personal life, or it could be in a project that you're working on where you hit an impasse. You don't know what to do next. You get writer's block, whatever the case may be. Well, at first, you're going to have a visceral reaction. You're going to get sad. You're going to get angry. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to feel lost. And eventually, you'll accept the reality of the situation and start working on a solution. Well, we're taught when we face challenges in life that we need to roll our sleeves up and face these challenges head on and work hard to find a solution. And that works, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, no matter how hard you work, a solution doesn't come to you. And today, I'm here to talk to you about a different perspective on facing those kinds of challenges. That when you're facing those challenges where you can't come up with a solution, no matter how hard you're beating your head against the wall, you need to disconnect and stop trying so hard and stop beating your head against the wall, and great solutions will present themselves to you. And to demonstrate that, I'd like to share my story of how I got to where I am today. See, I'm a business owner. I own the Digital Arts Experience right here in Scarsdale. Digital Arts Experience provides awesome after-school programs and summer camps for kids in technology. We teach game design, we teach coding, 3D printing, laser cutting, animation, video production, you name it. I'm also a college professor. I teach ideation and design thinking at the Heinz Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Iona College. And if you asked me when I was 15, 17, or even 20 years old, if by the time I was 35 I'd be a business owner and be a college professor, I would have looked at you like you had three heads. And truth be told, I spent my entire early life being fixated on being in the music business. See, when I was a kid, I loved gadgets and technology. I loved my Game Boy. In fact, here's a picture of me at about 4 years old allowing my brother to use my Game Boy. I loved taking electronics apart and seeing how they worked. I just loved cool gadgets. I also loved music. Now, throughout my years, I learned several instruments. I played the violin, I played the trumpet, I have an accordion, I play the sitar, and of course, I learned to play the guitar. And by the time I was in 8th grade, I started dabbling with writing my own music. So for my 14th birthday, my dad got me a Tascam 4-track cassette recorder, which I still have today, and it still works. And I had no idea what multi-track recording was at that time. I didn't know anything about music technology. So I got this thing, I didn't really know what to do with it, and I started tinkering with it, and then all of a sudden, music technology became my entire life. I mean, this was the perfect marriage between my love for gadgets and technology and my love for music. And I knew at that point that I was destined to be a recording engineer and work in recording studios, helping bands actualize their creative vision and working with all the cool technology in the studio. But the thing is, in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, there was no GarageBand. I mean, computers didn't come bundled with free, powerful recording software. In fact, when I was in middle school, it was a technological marvel to have a laptop with built-in wireless internet. I mean, to have a home recording setup was unheard of. I mean, you needed to spend thousands of dollars for a souped-up computer and all this equipment to record music. So in early high school, I had no access to explore music technology. I was basically limited to reading audio engineering magazines at the Borders in White Plains and playing with my 4-track in the basement. So I spent most of high school playing with my 4-track and playing in a heavy metal band. And I was lucky enough my junior year of high school to get an internship through school at a studio in Manhattan as a 17-year-old kid in a professional recording studio with absolutely no skill because I had nowhere to learn it. I basically sat in the corner and made coffee and ran errands and did the typical recording studio intern stuff. I did get to watch professional recording sessions in progress, and I did learn a lot, but I was hungry to get my hands on the gear. I mean, I wanted to experiment with microphones and EQs and compressors and learn about all this cool technology and use patch bays and all this cool stuff. And I couldn't do that. But everything changed for me my sophomore year of college for two reasons. One, I joined the Live Mix Club at Emerson's radio station. Emerson's radio station, WERS, was the most listened to college radio station in the country at that point. And they had this incredible studio that had real bands come in and broadcast live performances on air. And Live Mix was a student-run club, and we were all responsible for the audio engineering for those live broadcasts. Not only that, I got keys to the studio so I could go in and use the studio at any time that it wasn't booked. So I was in the studio at 5 o'clock in the morning at least 3 days a week because that was the only time it was available, experimenting and mixing and honing my skills. Now, the other reason my experience changed is I got an awesome summer internship that I stuck with through the rest of college at a recording studio in Manhattan called Manhattan Center Productions. Now, this was a multi-million-dollar studio that worked with A-list artists like Timbaland, Duran Duran, Jay-Z, Madonna. And over the years, I developed trust with the management there, and they let me come in and use the equipment after hours and even assistant engineer on some pretty big name sessions. And it was an amazing real-world experience. So I graduated college with these new skills, and I was hungry to get in the studio and start working with their bands and making their creative dreams come true. And I got a job working at a studio, an awesome studio on Long Island called Media Recording. Wasn't crazy about the name, but the studio was beautiful. It was built by the same acoustical architect as Jimi Hendrix Studio in Manhattan, so it looked like a mini version of Electric Lady, and it sounded amazing, and it had amazing equipment. But it was the summer of 2008 during the economic downturn, and nobody had big budgets for recording. In fact, recording studios were closing left and right. And so as a result of that, the studio couldn't pick and choose the sessions that we booked. I mean, we had to take any session that would come in. And I basically spent the majority of my time recording high school bands and artists that wanted to record 10 songs in 4 hours. Now, I did get a couple of great bands in there and had some really cool experiences, but for the most part, the work was kind of unfulfilling. In addition to that, my boss would say things to me like, don't use keyboard shortcuts in Pro Tools because if you do it the slow way, it adds more billable time to recording sessions. And that didn't resonate with me. I wanted to build relationships with artists and not watch the clock. I wanted to spend time with them in the studio, being creative and actualizing their creative visions. In addition to that, I was working crazy hours. I mean, I'd arrive at the studio when the sun was rising and I'd leave when the sun was rising, and there were no windows. It was like a time warp. So I spent all this time in the studio recording, frankly, unfulfilling work because we had to, and just spent so much time in there that I stopped listening to music for pleasure. I mean, my ears were so tired from mixing so many hours that I really couldn't bring myself to listen to music for fun anymore. And after almost 2 years of that, I just got so beat down and so frustrated. All of my passion was gone for music that I decided to leave. I left the music business and I didn't know what to do next. I was completely lost. I spent the greater part of my life fixated on being in the music business. And when it came time to do that, it wasn't what I expected. It was very different. And I did not know what to do next. I was lost. I was depressed. I just didn't know what to do. So I got a job at the Apple Store in Greenwich to get a paycheck and to get health insurance and keep me busy. And it was fun. It was fun. It was a nice distraction because I got to work around really cool technology. I got to teach people how to use their new computers. They were all excited about their new Mac, and I was excited to teach them about it. And it was a nice distraction. But I knew in the back of my mind that that wasn't the last stop for me. I wanted to do something more than that. And I really didn't know what to do, so I got to work. I started doing research, and I started meeting with career counselors, and I started meeting with people in different industries and talking to them, trying to figure out some path for me, and I just got nowhere. I mean, I didn't know what to do. Nothing was resonating with me. I was putting in all this work and just getting nowhere, so I just stopped. I figured I'll bide my time at Apple and see if something comes my way, and it did. One night I was hanging out with my best friend Mike, who I've known since I was 7, and we were reminiscing of the old days of high school, talking about our heavy metal band and skateboarding and all this stuff. And somehow or another, the topic of my experience being obsessed with audio engineering and not having anywhere to do that came up. And right away, he commiserated with me about that experience. And, in his case, he was a super talented artist, still is a super talented artist. And he had done the drawing and painting thing, but he was interested in other mediums. He was interested in, welding and carpentry and vacuum forming and all these things that he couldn't really do in school. And I thought for a second, well, if you had the same experience and I had the same experience, why is there nowhere for kids at a young age to explore the things they're passionate about? I mean, there are plenty of after-school clubs, but for me, there was nowhere for me to explore cool techie stuff. There was no recording studio. There was no video production studio that I could go and play around with. And that's where the idea for the digital arts experience came to be. I figured, let me give the kids the experience that I didn't have when I was in high school. I had no idea how to start a business. My entire life was fixated on music technology. I didn't know about business. I didn't know about starting a business. I didn't know the first thing about it. So I got to work. I started doing a little research. I started meeting with a family friend who had a lot of entrepreneurial experience, and he quickly became my mentor. We had breakfast once a week, talked about the things I was doing, the things I should be doing, and gave me general advice on the process of starting a business. And not only that, when I was at the Apple Store, I was teaching parents how to use their new computers. So while I was there, I talked to them about the idea. What classes should I offer? For what ages? How long is an ideal class? What would be a good summer camp format? And I was able to get real market research about the parents who would be signing their kids up for my classes. And after almost 2 years of hard work, I left my job at Apple, and through the support of my mentor and my family, I opened the Digital Arts Experience in 2012. And so here I am in my early 20s. No idea what to do next. I have a business. I have no idea what to do. But I started to build my team. I started to interview people to be instructors for the team. And when you meet somebody and you get that good gut feeling about them, oh, this person's going to be a good fit. Well, anybody that I got that good gut feeling from all said, I wish I had something like this when I was a kid. And that gave me confidence that the idea was a good idea, that this was a real need, that I wasn't the only one that felt that frustration as a kid. And I built this incredible team. The team at the DA is the lifeblood of the DA. That's what we're all about, this incredible group of creative people. And it took some time, but we started running classes. We ran one class, we ran two classes became four classes. And before we knew it, we had this crazy summer camp with hundreds of kids coming through. We were hiring new people and buying new technology and introducing new programs. Everything was going great. And then the STEM craze happened. All of a sudden, every single after-school provider had a STEM class, and every kid needed to learn how to code. Everybody was buying a 3D printer. And I knew our classes were great, and I knew that they would stand up to more competition. But we did see our enrollment drop because there were STEM programs that were popping up a little closer to home to some of our parents, and it might have been a little bit more convenient. I got worried. I was frustrated. I was scared. I said to myself, how could this be happening? Everything was going so well. How could this be happening? And eventually, I accepted the reality of the situation and I got to work. I started doing research and talking to people and coming up with new class formats and trying this and trying that, and nothing was working. I really didn't know what to do. I was getting so frustrated, beating my head against the wall, trying to come up with new formats to try and make the DAE stand out. And nothing was happening, and I just kind of gave up trying. So while this is going on, one day I'm talking to my dad, and we were just joking about crazy ideas for the DAE, buying this crazy piece of equipment and trying this insane new class format, just as a joke. We were laughing about it. And he's laughing at me, and he said, you should build a classroom in an RV. And I stopped and I said, wait a second, that's a great idea. And that's where the idea for Digital Arts Express came about. We took a Sprinter and built a classroom in the back of it that we could fit 10 kids in. We had Wi-Fi, we had power, we had all the technology needed to take a classroom from our facility and bring it on the road. And schools started booking it. It made our programs more accessible. We could bring all the technology needed for one of our classes. We could bring an entire classroom anywhere, to libraries, to youth organizations, to schools that may not have had the space or the technology. And that launched an entirely new facet of our business. Since then, we've built a huge equipment room full of mobile kits where we can bring laptops and all the necessary technology into schools to run classes. And since then, we've taught classes at dozens of schools to literally thousands of students all over Westchester. So for the past 8 years, we've dealt with a lot of different challenges. We've had new people join the team and people leave the team, and had enrollment change and tried new formats that failed. And I've certainly made enough mistakes than we have time to talk about. But as a team, we got through them because the team at the DAE is the most amazing team I've ever worked with in my life. And we faced all the challenges and we got through them. And then in March, COVID came around. At first, I didn't want to acknowledge that the coronavirus was as bad as it was being made out to be, because in the back of my mind, I knew that if it was, we were going to be in a challenging situation at the Digital Arts Experience. And it was as bad as they said. And before long, everything was shut down. Part of what the DAE has always been about is the learning environment, people coming together and collaborating and learning new skills and making new friends. And we couldn't have in-person classes. And I was angry and I was frustrated. But more than that, I was sad. I very realistically acknowledged that the Digital Arts Experience might have to close. And I was sad that I would have to talk to my team and tell them that we were closing and they would need to find new jobs. But my team and I rallied together, and my core team, Lori, Emily, and Nick, are some of the most intelligent, hardworking, and passionate people I've ever met. And we rallied together as a team and we said, you know what? We accept the situation. Let's see if we can figure this out. And we started working out solutions, but we didn't go into crisis mode. What we did is we met at 11 a.m. every day of the week on Google Meet, and we made a point to laugh, have a little fun, and start throwing out crazy ideas, exploring all the options, because why not? We had nothing to lose. So we started looking at what loans were available. We started looking at what free versions of the software we use existed so we could make online programs more accessible. We started experimenting with different online class formats to really facilitate collaboration, even if we couldn't be in person. We built online collaborative gaming sessions just to give kids something fun to do with their friends because they couldn't see them in person. And we ran a super successful summer program where we brought kids together. We had fun. We built things as a team. We collaborated. And more than that, we made the DAE programs more accessible because they were online. And we taught kids all over the country. And as a team, we got through it. So you may be asking yourself, that's a great story, but what's the point? Well, for the past few years teaching at Iona College, it's been my job to help college students come up with great ideas and execute them. And I've put them through dozens of ideation techniques, all kind of wacky stuff. The one thing that reigns true through all of these different exercises is that the best ideas and the best solutions come when we're at play and when our minds are disconnected, when we're having fun. I mean, that's why you get great ideas when you're standing in the shower, because your mind's not fixated on anything. You're just drifting in space. When I left the music business and I felt totally lost, the idea of the DAE didn't come from me sitting in front of my computer and writing out pages of notes and doing all this research. It came from me having fun with my friend, reminiscing of the old days. When we faced the challenge of the STEM craze at the Digital Arts Experience and saw our enrollment drop, we didn't spend all this time doing market research and trying out new formats. Well, we did try new formats and they didn't work. The idea of the Digital Arts Express came from just joking around with my dad and having fun and throwing crazy ideas out there. And when COVID came around, we survived by coming together as a team and making it a point to laugh and have fun together and throw out crazy ideas because, like I said, we had nothing to lose, so we might as well have a little fun and throw out some crazy ideas. The point is that when you're faced with a challenge, it's okay to have that visceral reaction at first. It's okay to go into crisis mode. It's okay to feel angry, to feel lost, to feel sad, to feel frustrated. But if you embrace the situation and put aside your feelings of anger, frustration, and embrace the chaos of what's going on, great solutions will reveal themselves to you. I'm not trying to discount hard work. I mean, we put in tons of hard work to bring these solutions to life. But the ideas of these solutions came from when we were joking around or having fun or at play, but not feeling stressed out, not feeling anger, not feeling frustration. Embracing the reality of the situation, putting those visceral feelings aside, and being creative. You can't force good ideas. If you've ever tried to come up with a good idea and you sit there beating your head against the table, they don't come. They come when you least expect it. So surround yourself with people that inspire you. Make it a point to laugh. Do something wacky and fun. Good ideas will come from that. Step back and laugh at how crazy the situation is. Remove yourself from it so you can be creative. Put yourself in a state of mind that facilitates ideation and creativity. And these challenges will no longer look like challenges, but opportunities for new possibilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Now you will hear from Elza Erkip. Elza Erkip is a professional in electrical and computer engineering at the NYU Tandem School of Engineering. Dr. Erkip has received many awards for exceptional research, including the Institute of Electrical Electronics Engineers Communication Society, WICE, Outstanding Achievement Award in 2016. Dr. Erkip has received a BS degree in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from the Middle East Technical University and an MS and PhD degree in Electrical Engineering from Stanford University. She has published research in information theory, communication theory, and wireless communications. Dr. Erkip is a distinguished lecturer at the IEE. She has given many talks at NYU, the US, and in many other distinguished places and locations across the world.
My name is Elza Erkip. It's hard to believe, but I've been in this institution for almost 20 years. I started in 1999, and this institution has changed for the better, and we're going up. We're going up at a fast pace. I'm a professor in the Electrical and Computer Engineering department, and I realized that I'm the opening act for the better presentations to come by our young students, by our junior faculty. So I wanted to take some time and talk a little bit about what engineering is, what it is to me, where do I stand in this engineering world. And I also wanted to give you a flavor of some of the projects that we've been doing, particularly looking at networks, understanding and engineering networks, from wireless networks to social networks. I'm also a proud mom of two teenagers, two teenage daughters, and they and their friends often ask me, what is engineering? Isn't it a boring subject? And I say, on the contrary, it's one of the best jobs in the world, and I hope I can convince the non-engineers in the room that it's the best job in the world. Now, what is engineering? Okay, so if, the dictionary definition of engineering is application of scientific knowledge to solve real-world problems. And you'll often see engineering together with science, right? Science and engineering. What's the difference between science and engineering? What does a scientist do? What does an engineer do? Well, scientists' goal is to understand the universe and to create knowledge to understand the universe, whereas an engineer takes that knowledge and uses it to solve real-world problems by designing and building things. So, you know, a scientist maybe looks like the one on the left, and an engineer. You know, interestingly, I was searching for cartoon engineers in the internet, and everything that came up had a hard hat and kind of building. Well, there are some engineers who do that, but many of the engineers look like me, maybe in shabbier clothes, you know, sitting in an office in front of a computer with pen and pencil. So we do a lot of interesting things. Now, what does an engineer do? You know, okay, so it solves real-world problems. How does an engineer do it? Well, I think the first and the most important step, or one of the most important steps of engineering, is taking that real-world problem, which is very complex, and abstracting it out. You know, what's the essence of that problem? And it's very important to come up with an abstract model that's tractable, so you can understand and study it, but it's complicated enough that it captures some of the essences of the real world. So this is the art of engineering, if you will. Now, once you have a good abstract model, the next step is to understand that model and come up with solutions. And an engineer has a lot of tools at her disposal, such as you know, many scientific fields, from biology to physics to chemistry, and certainly math, a lot of math, you know, which is what makes it fun. To understand this abstract problem and devise solutions, taking into account practical constraints. Now, practical is very important here. We just don't want to come up with any solution. We want to come up with solutions that realize that the real world has these constraints, whether they're, you know, energy, whether they're computational constraints, the materials you can use. So these are very important in understanding engineering problems. Now, computational tools are very important as well. And my dad was a civil engineer, and he spent a good part of his career using this computational tool. Does anybody know what this is? Yeah. So my dad used to go on and on how he would kind of, you know, compute using slide rule. I never got to see them, but you know, I certainly use computers and more sophisticated computational tools, which we call artificial intelligence, machine learning. These are all the tools at an engineer's disposal. And at the end of the day, the engineer has to ensure that the design solution works in the real world. So, and never is the solution done in a one-shot basis. There's a constant feedback loop that the engineer has to go through. So we abstract our problem, we solve it, and then we have to build and test and send it out to the real world. Right? And the real world tells us that our solution works in certain ways, but doesn't work in certain other ways. So we have to get it back to our engineering domain, this abstract domain, refine our model, refine our solution. And rarely this is done by one person. It takes a team of engineers to do all of this, right? And it takes a team of engineers to communicate within the team, but it also takes the team of engineers to talk to people who have this real-world problem. So engineering involves art. It involves communication. Certainly communication skills are very important. That's why it's the best job in the world. And it involves math. I love math. Okay, so what do I do? Where do I stand in this engineering world? Now, in high school, you know, as you've realized, you know, I was a good student. I loved math. But I didn't want to be just, I shouldn't say just, but I didn't want to be a mathematician working on pure math problems. I wanted to use math to do things. So engineering was the natural choice for me, and I went into electrical engineering. And my area can be called, in general, networks. And I stand more on the side of abstract modeling and solving problems using that abstract model. But I also collaborate with many other engineers in understanding the practical problems, practical constraints. And once in a while, we'll go out and build things as well. So certainly I have physics, and I have a lot of math at my disposal, but also a lot of the computational tools as well. So today I want to give you a flavor of the kinds of things that I've been working on. And I want to kind of give two examples, one from wireless networks, which is an area that I've spent throughout my career. I want to tell you an earlier work that we did when I started my career at NYU, which kind of really jump-started my career and went on for almost 2 decades. And I want to tell you a little bit about social networks, an area that we've started getting into recently. Now, before I tell you about my work, I want to tell you how your phone works, right? 30-second introduction to wireless 101. Well, so any wireless system is going to follow a certain kind of infrastructure. And the way it works is that there are base stations, or if you're using Wi-Fi, there are access points that your phone communicates with. So whenever you want to make a call, your phone connects to a base station, and then the base station takes your signals wherever they need to go. Similarly, if you want to download a YouTube video on your phone, you'll receive it over the wireless link through your base station. So if I wanted to text Yelena, we couldn't do it directly. It has to go through the base station. And that's the basic structure that all wireless networks abide by. Now, our idea, again, when I started my career here, was to look at wireless networks and try to solve this problem of having unreliable wireless links. So when a phone is trying to talk to the base station, that wireless link is typically unreliable because, we move around, the environment changes, signals can get blocked. So then what happens? You don't want to lose the communication, right? So you either need to find another base station to connect to, or you need to somehow try to repair that link. And our solution was kind of a very naive one, if you will, a very simple one. We said, well, there are other phones nearby. Why don't I use them to help me out? They're around me. They can overhear me. Maybe they can forward my information to the base station. And then maybe when I'm in a bad spot, Yelena helps me, and when she's in a bad spot, I help her out. So it works out for both of us and it improves communication for both of us. Now, of course, devil is in the details, right? It took us many, many, many years, many students, many papers to actually nail this down, get an abstract model, show that it works. And this area called cooperative networking was in fact pioneered by NYU, myself and other researchers. And we had many students, many talented students. Collectively, me and my colleagues won several awards. We had important papers, and we did, in fact, build test beds. And some of our ideas impacted industry standardization and inspired different wireless technologies based on this idea of cooperation, Sometimes cooperating mobile, sometimes cooperating base stations, but this kind of idea made it itself into reality. Of course, now we're part of a much bigger center called NYU Wireless, and we're at the forefront of wireless research. And we're looking into 5G wireless, that's the next generation of wireless, where it's no longer humans communicating, it's machines communicating. Whether as in Internet of Things, your fridge orders milk, when it realizes that you're out of milk, or maybe kind of more impactful solutions such as healthcare, wildlife monitoring, you name it. We're also looking at robotics applications, industrial automation, where wireless is an important component to make autonomy among the robots. Autonomous driving, augmented reality, virtual reality. So now we're going beyond humans communicating, and wireless link is still an important part of it. So next, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, and I want to tell you a little bit about a recent project that we've started working on, which is looking at social networks, and in particular, privacy in social networks. Now, of course, we're all worried about online privacy, right? We're worried about, Facebook selling our data, Google, cell phone companies. And the kind of privacy that I'm going to address here maybe goes back to the Netflix Grand Challenge. Who here remembers the Netflix Grand Challenge? A few people. So About a little over a decade ago, Netflix wanted to improve its recommendation systems. So it said, I'm going to provide data to researchers so that they could come up with better recommender systems than I can. So to do that, Netflix provided users and the movies that they liked and the stars that they gave, made it available to researchers. But in order to protect privacy of users, removed user identities. Okay, so they thought that that would keep anonymity of the users. Little did they know that there were a lot of researchers out there who went into public databases like Internet Movie Database, figured out people with their own identities, what they did, how they rated the movies, and were able to match and figure out many users' identities on Netflix. This caused a big uproar. There were some lawsuits filed. There were similar incidents happening with AOL, making available the search data by removing identity of users. Again, the same thing. Using publicly available information, it was possible to de-anonymize the users. And more recently, we see similar kinds of privacy issues happening in social networks. We all have our professional identities on LinkedIn. Right? We also have our personal social networks such as Facebook, Instagram. And we wouldn't want our professional and personal identities to be matched with one another. But it turns out that it's not too difficult to match identities across social networks. There's been several researchers showing that this is possible. So our approach has been, again, looking at this practical problem and trying to understand the fundamentals by abstracting it out. So we've recently started looking at database and graph matching in social networks. So imagine two databases, such as Rotten Tomatoes and Netflix rankings. In one database, you know the identities of the users. In the other one, you don't. But certainly, there's some relationship among these two databases. Similarly, you can envision two social networks. In one, you know the identities. In the other, you don't. But certainly, there's a relation. They're not the identical social networks, but they're related. So can we use properties of these databases and social networks to actually map the users? So what we're doing is we're coming up with tractable yet realistic mathematical models. We're trying to understand some of the fundamental limits and algorithms. In particular, when can you match the users? And that's not a good thing, right? So how do we protect anonymity if we don't want users to be matched? Maybe we could add some noise, but we still want to maintain the usefulness of these databases. And then we're also thinking about good applications of this. Maybe matching these databases could be desirable. My husband is a cancer researcher, and he says that one of the important problems they face is that they have a database of childhood cancer survivors, but they cannot constantly monitor all of them, right? And they have a database of adult cancer patients, right? So these databases are anonymized. Researchers aren't supposed to know the identities. But if you could match these two databases, then you could learn what happens to childhood cancer survivors when they become adults, and it could be a very useful information. So I hope I've kind of managed to convince the non-engineers in the crowd that engineering is an exciting field. It involves artistry, it involves communication, it involves a lot of technical tools, but it also involves talking to a lot of people. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you.
That was a great speech. Our final speaker is Paul Feiner. Paul is currently serving his 29th year as Greenburgh Town Supervisor. He is the longest serving town supervisor in Greenburgh history, one of the largest towns in Westchester, and previously served as a member of the Westchester County Board of Legislators for 8 years. Mr. Feiner, a graduate of Scarsdale High School, also graduated from Fordham University and received his JD degree from St. John's University School of Law. Mr. Feiner is also an adjunct professor of local and state government at Westchester Community College, and he hosts a weekly radio program on W Vox Radio in New Rochelle. He is known for his constituent services and often makes house calls to residents who have government-related problems.
Hi, my name's Paul Feiner, and some of you may know me as a Greenburgh Town Supervisor. In 1973, 47 years ago, I was just like you. I was a student at Scarsdale High School and was so excited to run for my first office, Scarsdale High School Student Council President. I had lots of ideas. I wanted to put benches outside for students to eat, something they did not have. I wanted an all-weather track. I had my first lesson in politics, losing. Even though I lost, I never gave up on the platform and ideas I believed in. At least 2 of the platform ideas I pushed were implemented. Today, there's an all-weather track at Scarsdale High School, and there's also outside seating in front of the school. And even though I lost my first election, I learned lessons about campaigning, running for office, and it helped me get elected to the County Board of Legislators. Was elected as a Westchester legislator 4 times, and I was elected and re-elected as Greenburgh Town Supervisor. We're the largest town in Westchester for over 29 years. It's my hope that each of you will speak out on issues that concern all of you. Do the right thing, work hard, and don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to accomplish things which are difficult, and don't feel you should only push for goals which you are sure you can easily attain. Another message I'd like to make in my TED Talk is failure. To succeed, you need to learn how to fail. My experience running for Student Council President helped me win other offices later in my life. What turned out to be a big disappointment in high school led to a very rewarding career. After law school, I will never forget the disappointment I had applying for a job with a very prestigious New York City law firm. I had a fantastic first interview, and I was called back for a second interview. I was ecstatic. I was sure I'd get the job. I got a third interview, and what happened? I never heard back. I was so disappointed. I waited behind my phone. I called them. They didn't talk to me. I walked into their offices. They saw me, and they ran the other way. I sent them a stamped, self-addressed envelope asking them to check off yes or no. Did I get the job? No. But my experiences being treated with so little respect and feeling so low and disgusted after the job interview helped me become more empathetic. And as town supervisor, I have helped hundreds of people find jobs. When somebody is out of work and they come to me, I want to help them. Failure is an important part of learning and growing. Don't be embarrassed to fail. Learn from each failure. Did you know Abraham Lincoln, whose statue is behind me, lost 8 elections? He failed in business and he had a nervous breakdown. He could have quit many times, but he never did. Joseph Biden, who recently became the Democratic nominee for president, tried to become president for 30 years. He also never quit. Ronald Reagan lost presidential races. Barack Obama lost a congressional race. A perfect example of losing is Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison tried over 10,000 times to invent a commercially viable electric light bulb. He never gave up. And Walt Disney was fired for not having imagination. Even geniuses get rejected. Who would reject Albert Einstein? Somebody did. Albert Einstein sent many applications for jobs in his early 20s after graduating college. It took 2 years and many applications for Einstein to get his job. In 1907, Einstein received a rejection letter for the position of associate professor at the University of Bern. Failure is a step to take before you succeed. Think of Jonas Salk, who experienced 4 years before the vaccine was discovered to eradicate polio. Think of all the failures in finding a vaccine for COVID. I always tell people when they're looking for a job and they're frustrated, they've been waiting and waiting and waiting, keep getting rejected, said, try getting 100 rejections, because every rejection you get will make it one step closer to getting the job. Another message I have is to work hard. Be persistent. Don't give up. When I was 16, I headed up a group called the Task Force for Bikeways. We wanted Westchester to build the first bikeway in Westchester County on the Bronx River Parkway. The county executive wasn't really that interested. The Board of Legislators was not interested, but I organized a committee. I called legislators at home. I wrote letters to the editors. I met with editorial page editors and persuaded them to write editorials. I attended every meeting of the County Board of Legislators. In short, I was a pain in the neck, a gadfly, an annoyance, an irritant. One day, the minority leader of the Westchester County Board of Legislators called me up, sat me down, and offered me a deal. He and the legislature would approve the first bikeway to be built in Westchester on the Bronx River Parkway if I would agree not to show up at any meeting of the Board of Legislators for 6 months. I made my deal, and we accomplished what we set out to. We got the Bronx River Parkway first bikeway built, which is still in place. And since the early 1970s, more and more bike paths have been built in Westchester and the entire region. We recently have seen the South County Trail become a bikeway, the North County Trail all the way from the Bronx to Putnam County, and most recently a bike path was built on the Mario Cuomo Bridge. Another message I have is please speak out. In recent years, I've had the privilege of working with many students from area high schools. A 6th grader in Edgemont is organizing an effort to persuade the town to build a sidewalk in Edgemont. She has spoken out at town board meetings, been interviewed by TV stations that cover the metropolitan area. Other students are promoting composting. During the snowstorms, students have headed up a Snow Angels program in town. They're offering to clear driveways of snow for senior citizens and people with disabilities. During the recent COVID-19 pandemic, other students have volunteered their time delivering food for the elderly. This past summer, we created a student summer internship program, and we had over 40 students, some from Scarsdale High School, who produced public service announcements about wearing masks during COVID, or coming up with safety tips so we could avoid pedestrian or motorist accidents. Greenberg experienced some fatalities in the past year. Another message I have, which is easier said than done, is do not be jealous. However, hard work remains a critical factor in accomplishing your goals in life, regardless of how tired you are of hearing it. Some people find accomplishing educational goals very, very easy. You don't have to study, but you get straight A's. But other people always struggle. Some people are instantly popular in school. They're part of the A crowd. They effortlessly navigate the social scene at school, and other people find it very, very difficult and anxiety-provoking. Some individuals have access to great resources, others do not. We are extremely different. None of us are better or worse than anybody else. However, the indicator of whom you become and what you accomplish, it often relates to how much you want it. If you want something bad enough, you can find a way to get there. Maybe the road's going to be steeper or a more difficult climb, but if you work hard, you'll be successful, and if you don't work hard, you won't be successful. Sometimes the person who might have been laughed at high school becomes more successful than somebody who had it all in high school. Do not be afraid to do what is right, even if it's not popular. When I was a little older than you, in 1977, I organized an effort to persuade the Scarsdale Town Club to admit women as members. Scarsdale had a nonpartisan system. candidates ran unopposed for mayor and trustee. Traditionally, the nonpartisan system selected as the mayor of Scarsdale somebody who previously was president of the Scarsdale Town Club. But the town club excluded women. So to be mayor, you had to be a man. And I don't think that was fair. We had an equal rights, people are pushing for an equal rights amendment, and Scarsdale certainly did not practice that. Scarsdale Town Club members loved the tradition that they had. For years, they claimed that having women as members of the town club would be a big distraction and make it difficult for them to do the work of overseeing town government. Again, this is 1977, not 1877. Some have tried unsuccessfully for years to persuade the town club that women should have a voice in Scarsdale government. And nothing ever happened, so I decided to get involved. I organized a group called People for a Whole Town Club. I went door to door. I collected over 1,000 signatures of people who were active in the community who supported women's rights. I got nowhere. Then I came up with an idea. I wrote to the New York State Board of Education, and I questioned whether the school district could exclude women from attending meetings in a public building. They said women could not be excluded. Women could then attend meetings and distract men, but they were only observers for a period of time. So I called the National Organization of Women. We picketed the town club before every meeting. As people were entering the meeting, they were greeted by picketers. We called the national and local TV stations, and a vote was scheduled. And the town club said they were going to vote to admit women as members. But what happened was many of the leaders of the town club were prominent leaders in the New York City area. They were influenced by peer pressure at the local level and had supported a discriminatory policy. They were actually proud of it. But when they faced TV cameras taping their vote, they did not want to embarrass themselves professionally, and they chose to do the right thing. So women were admitted as members of the town club, and we've had some women mayors of Scarsdale since that time. Right after I graduated law school, I worked on another issue. One day, I realized that the trains were not operating efficiently. The trains were packed like sardines, the windows didn't open, it was 100 degrees inside, trains got stuck at Grand Central Tunnel for over an hour, and I decided to do something about it. So I asked residents if they wanted to start a bus service from Scarsdale and Hartsdale to New York City. I called a bus company, I asked if we could rent a few buses. I thought it would be simple, but it wasn't. I went to the Hartsdale train station in the town of Greenburgh and started handing out questionnaires. Within an hour, the Greenburgh police approached me because somebody complained and told me that if I did not leave, they would arrest me. I was a recent graduate of St. John's Law School and did not want to be disbarred before I even started my career, so I left. But I contacted the Associated Press, and the controversy received front-page news coverage. Metro North backed down. I continued my questionnaire, rented 3 buses, and the commuters loved the service, until the county of Westchester, New York City, and the village of Scarsdale fought back. My bus service was kicked off Central Avenue, New York City kicked us off 5th Avenue and Madison Avenue, and Scarsdale kicked us off Fenimore Road. And my service was all volunteer. I did not get paid. The county started an express bus service to New York City that was subsidized, bigger and better than mine. The lesson, although my service was finally terminated, it promoted the county to start its own service, which turned out to be better than the one I could have done alone. I dared to improve service, showed it was possible. I embarrassed the powers to be. They addressed the important safety issue, and residents of Westchester now have bus service. Another message is do the right thing. The right thing is very subjective. What's right for me may be wrong for somebody else. And always be open to reconsider your values and understand that they will change as your experience grows. Don't be rigid. Many of our national leaders have changed their views on civil rights, abortion, climate change, gay rights, and other issues. Your views may also one day change on social issues. There is nothing more important in your life than personal integrity and living with your actions and values and feeling good about the choices you make. Keep in mind, while being secure in your beliefs, others within your world will be struggling through the same process and will develop opinions in direct opposition to yours. The ability to listen openly to other opinions, even when they strongly fly in the face of your own, is an important part of having integrity. One of the most important lessons you can learn is respect for differences. The concept of success is also subjective. For some, great wealth and power equals success. For others, being a good parent and partner equals success. For others, making the world a better place means success. Establishing for yourself what success is might and will determine your level of fulfillment. Going forward, be courageous, press your limits, and don't fear failure. Work hard with the understanding that although others might find the road to success easier or might begin with greater access and resources, succeeding on your own, using your own will and hard work is most gratifying. Do the right thing. Do not ever compromise your sense of right and wrong, but remain open to change and new ideas, and have a healthy respect for differences, as there is something to learn from everyone. A number of years ago, I met John Glenn, the astronaut who was the first American to orbit the Earth in 1962. Mr. Glenn, who was then a senator, told me to reach for the stars. I say to all of you, reach for the stars. Challenge yourself to excel in life and be happy. I want to thank Scarsdale TEDx for providing me with this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you so much.
That was a great way to end off our 2020 TEDxScarsdale event. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to hear from our speakers. We would also like to give a thank you to our speakers, Genevieve, Rob, Elza, and Paul. Thank you so much for being flexible and working with us through our many triumphs.
Thank you for making today an incredible event. We truly appreciate your attendance. And we have to say a huge thank you to our faculty advisor, Mrs. Rogerson-Swag, for helping us coordinate this event.
Thank you for watching. If you'd like to know more about TEDx Scarsdale, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or check out our website. Our links are in our YouTube bio and the description below.